What has the Father done? Well, he is completing his prison break. First, he escapes from the totality of infinity by moving the yolk out away from the egg, and by reunifying the yolk with the white through the universal absolute. Now, he is escaping from diffusion throughout the whole of the yolk. First, by separating himself from the absolute personality, which is his Son. And then by uniting himself with the Son in the trinitization of the conjoint Creator. And now we have the organization of undivided deity incorporated, which is the Paradise Trinity, which fills the yoke. And now the Father can sustain a relationship to not only the totality of infinity, but also the wholeness of deity. He has completed his escape. He has produced elbow room and liberty of action. And now, instead of calling the yoke the qualified absolute, let's call it by its more conventional name, the deity absolute. This is the derivation, as I visualize it, of the deity absolute. As it says, by the technique of trinitization, the Father divests himself of that unqualified spirit personality which is the Son. But in so doing, he constitutes himself the Father of this very Son, and thereby possesses himself of unlimited capacity to become the divine Father of all subsequently created, eventuated, or other personalized types of intelligent will creatures. We have now a space stage set and a divinity stage set for everything that's happened since. As the author of Paper 10 says, we believe that the Trinity is an absolute inevitability. We just don't see how the darn thing could happen unless you have a Trinity. How else can the Father achieve liberty at the same time retaining primacy? As the Paradise Trinity, deity still fills the wholeness of deified reality, whether it be on one or another level of this firehouse, and on the top level, the Paradise Trinity activates the deity absolute, which, through the universal absolute, produces repercussions in the unqualified absolute. I think we should take note of the fact that Trinity formation is associated with the formation of what I would like to suggest we think of as a nuclear universe. Havona is not an end in and of itself, is it? Havona is a nucleus, is it not? It is a center universe designed to work in connection with outlying universes. The 7 superuniverses are cytoplasmic universes in relation to nuclear Havona. Let me give you the definition of nucleus and cytoplasm because we're going to use it. Defined as an organ present in the protoplasm of most plant and animal cells and regarded as an essential agent in their constructive metabolism, growth, and reproduction, and in the hereditary transmission of character. And then stands in contrast to cytoplasm, which is defined as the protoplasm of the cell exclusive of the nucleus. In an egg, the yellow portion would be the nucleus and the white would be the cytoplasm. Regard paradise as a nucleus. I regard Havona as the true nucleus of the grand universe. We're thinking of an egg in another sense now, aren't we? The grand universe is defined as the 7 super-universes as dependent on Havona. This nucleus was formed in conjunction with a Trinitization Act and the formation of the Paradise Trinity. And I think as we study the development of these levels, we're going to see this same theme repeat itself. That's why I'm belaboring a little bit the concept of nuclear universes and cytoplasmic universes. Let's go back now and consider what we've covered. Deity is still static. The unity of all deity is still real. But now potentials have appeared. Deity is not just self-contained and self-existent. Deity has expressed will, has expressed purpose. Besides that, deity has now personalized itself. We don't just have a lonesome deity yearning for companionship on paradise. We have an infinite society existing on paradise. As the papers say, 3 persons are a minimum social group. And this is the least of all the reasons which indicate that the Trinity is necessary. God enjoys social intercourse with 2 equal beings. Social intercourse is essential to the avoidance of lonesomeness. And I think the Trinity concept is essential to the maintenance of the personal concept of God once you get away from the anthropomorphic level. The papers make that point very clear. 1145. Paragraph 1, 2, 3, and 4. The paper, this is the growth of the Trinity concept, the paper points out that if you have a solitary deity, incidentally, check also Rodin's challenging of God's personality. This bothered Rodin too. If you have God all alone, how can he be personal? Who knows him as a person? Of course, Nathaniel's argument was, Jesus knows him as a person, can communicate with him as a person, and we can communicate with Jesus. But if you have God alone, if you've got Unitarianism, Unitarian monotheism, then as you begin to philosophize your religion, and as you de-anthropomorphize, dehumanize the God concept, you stand in danger of winding up not with God, but with an absolute, an impersonal focus of universal law. And damn it, you can't worship an absolute. You can't have much feeling about an absolute. But in Trinitarian monotheism, you never run this risk. When you de-anthropomorphize God, or depersonalize God, then you deal with something like the Paradise Trinity, and you don't, well, here. When you depersonalize deity, consider the deity absolute. Here's the comment of a universal censor. We know the universal Father, the eternal Son, and the infinite Spirit as persons, but I do not personally know the deity absolute. I love and worship God the Father. I respect and honor the deity absolute. When you depersonalize God, you devitalize religion. You end up with a code of ethics, a philosophy, a metaphysics, a cosmology. You can have a beautiful Cadillac, but brother, you ain't got no spark plugs in the engine. Classic example of the difference. Contrast. I don't like Paul's letters very well, but I think Paul was a great guy. You know, he tried. Contrast Paul's enthusiasm with the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, which is the height of Stoic philosophy. Marcus went heavily and regretfully to the wars in Bohemia, and Paul was an enthusiastic warrior who near the end of his years could write, "I fought a good fight. I've kept the faith." That's the difference between philosophy and religion. It doesn't have so much to do with morals, virtue, and ethics, but it has to do with, listen, the Urantia papers present, I think, the most sane religion that's ever been offered the human race. If you want the calories of temporal success, don't look for it in the Urantia papers or in religion. These temporal calories by which you grow temporally fat, you define fat in any way you want to, you get by temporal effort. As Rodin well said, if you want to be materially rewarded, then you have got to pitch your economic tent alongside the stream where wealth flows. And you can bestow a wonderful life up in the highlands and be wholly unrewarded. But what would calories taste like without condiments? These papers present religion not as changing the caloric content of temporal life, but as providing the salt wherewith life achieves an entirely different flavor. Religion is not calories in the temporal sense, but religion changes the taste of the calories of temporal living. Does this make sense to you? I think you enjoy eating each day much more if you have the salt and pepper of a religious attitude and a cosmic philosophy. Damn it all, if you know that this life is kindergarten, you look at it so differently, don't you? It doesn't affect your bank balance. I mean, this you get by, just like you always get money. You know, you work for it. Use your brains and ingenuity. But you can have so much more fun in the process. Paulina boiled me 2 very nice 5-minute eggs this morning. I could have eaten them without salt and pepper, but they were a lot more fun with the salt and the pepper. And that to me is what these papers add to life. Not material prosperity. B.M. Salyer and I have a lot of fun locking horns on this point. He's still got a lot of the old Egyptian notion that your bank balance and your spiritual and moral virtue have a one-in-one relationship. I don't believe that. But it seems to work for him. Of course, Charlie Rawson, you all remember him? Mm-hmm. Charlie always believed that you don't have to worry about money, that the Lord will provide. And so help me, Hannah, it worked for Charlie.
The papers don't express that.
No, it just worked for Charlie, that's all. Charlie would be stony broke and want to take Ann out to dinner, and sure enough, someone had come along to get married and slip Charlie $20. It worked for Charlie.
It was good psychology.
Yeah, it don't work for me, though. We've gone through the static, the potential, the associative, and the creative stages of total deity function. Have these stages been completed? I would submit, no. I don't know about static and potential. Maybe they have been. But the associations of deity haven't been completed. The existential associations of deity have been completed. They were completed with the formation of the Paradise Trinity. But there are other associations possible associations between existential deity and experiential deity. Creation, the initial creative act, is expressed in Havona. You say, well, now wait a minute, how about paradise? I just don't think of paradise as being an act of creation. It's pre-created. I think of creation as being inaugurated by the infinite spirit. And by virtue of this creative act, the infinite spirit comes into being. And that creative act is expressed in the central universe. The God of action functions, the dead vaults of space are astir. Is creation finished? No. From a qualitative standpoint, it's been perfectly expressed. But obviously, from a quantitative standpoint, it's only been inaugurated. The seven superuniverses have yet to appear. Outer space has yet to appear. And what lies beyond that has yet to appear. Here's another principle. Perfection of quality can achieve expression in the absence of infinity of quantity. Let's analyze this. When the Father and Son conceptualized Havona, and when the conjoint Creator produced it, did they hold back in any way in terms of quality of expression? The answer is no. Havona is perfect. And if you inventory what's in Havona, you can realize how tremendous is the quality of perfection in Havona. The paper on the central and divine universe doesn't talk about very much that's in Havona because they inventory the levels of Havona existence as material, morontial, spiritual. This makes sense, but then they go on. Absonite, ultimate, co-absolute, and absolute. The eternal Son made 7 bestowals in Havona. And it took the original Michael 7 bestowals to make these real to the natives of Havona. Havona lacks nothing in terms of the expression of divine perfection. It is an unlimited expression of divinity in quality. The Father and the Son pulled no punches, did they? This represents all that 2 infinite, eternal, existential deities could think of, and that a 3rd equal deity could express in terms of quality of perfection, but not quantity. The universal Father and the eternal Son hadn't the least intention of doing the whole job. If they had, they would have produced a Havona that had no boundary, an infinite Havona. They didn't do that, did they? They limited Havona strictly to 1 billion worlds. Here is quantitative limitation without qualitative limitation. This is a very important concept. We're going to come right back to it again at the end of this chapter in our discussions. You can have absolute quality without infinite quantity. And Havona is the proof of it. In discussing Havona, the papers say Havona has enough of the absoluteness of the quality of divinity so that it can serve as a training school for paradise ascenders no matter what level they approach paradise on. I think there's a lot about Havona that we won't even realize when we go through. I think the whole story of Havona is pretty much the first grade level of Havona.
You mean what they're telling us?
Yes.
Yeah.
Dorothy, you know anything about seraphim except through the papers and the Bible? You know any personally? Know any midwares? We got a whole division of archangels here on the planet. We got at least one company of phonelators stationed here. One company of phonelators. We've got all kinds of the seraphim, master seraphim of planetary supervision here. We got a resident governor general of Verondadek Observer. Gosh, I bet there are all kinds of casual Melchizedeks floating around. Student visitors. Just to register this point rather thoroughly, I'll give you the number of seraphim on the planet as of the date of these papers. Let me see. Somewhere in here. At noon today, the roll call of planetary angels, guardians, and others on Urantia was 501,234,619 pairs of seraphim, or 1,194,000 seraphim. And I am absolutely unconscious of the presence of any of these seraphim. And anything you got a billion of isn't exactly rare.
Is it your opinion that anyone on the planet at the present time is conscious of these people?
I don't think so, no. Reservist might be under rare and unusual circumstances. We're told that sometimes at moments of death, the dying mortal dimly perceives the seraphim and immediately, of course, translates it into conventional seraphic imagery.
Yeah.
Okay. When we go through Havona, I think we're going to be just as ignorant of a lot that's going on in Havona as we are right here on this planet.
On our initial sojourn, really.
Right.
Yeah.
And as long as we're operating on the first floor, which means as long as we know anything about phonelators. The oldest phonelators in existence are still operating on the first floor.
Today? Oh.
I think Havona exists on all three floors. So, the Universal Father and the Eternal Son and their deity equal, the conjoint actor, evidently didn't want to do the whole job, did they? They wanted a perfect universe. They wanted to express themselves. And when they expressed themselves, they didn't hold back. They pulled no punches. They produced a universe which, among other things, is absolute in quality of divinity and all other things regarding perfection. We're examining what I think is one of the basic concepts in the Urantia book. The 7 levels of the function of total deity. And we started out with the static level, which means that everything is self-contained. As they say later on, infinity is filled by the infinite and is encompassed by infinitude. This is the nearest you can come to saying that you start with a homogeneous beginning. But it's really not homogeneous, it's heterogeneous. A homogeneous beginning would be the scrambled egg that we talked about. And the papers specifically refuse to validate the homogeneity of original reality. They say there was always the possibility for self-will. And so we start not with a scrambled egg, but a fried egg. A yellow, or a nucleus, and a white, or a cytoplasm. I like that too, because the potential for growth is in the nucleus, not in the cytoplasm. It's the nucleus that initiates change. It's the cytoplasm that responds to change. And that suggests the difference between deity and non-deity. Deity is active. Non-deity is passive. Deity initiates. Non-deity responds. Or deity takes snuff, and the unqualified absolute sneezes. And so we project what happens when we hit the second level of total deity function. This involves a separation from, a separation between the cytoplasm and the nucleus. The yolk moves out away from the egg, and immediately a relationship establishes between the yolk and the egg. The reactive, non-initiating, responsive cytoplasm is the unqualified absolute. The yolk is the totality of deity, which at this point we call the qualified absolute, because it's changed position. This universal absolute, we are informed, functions on the static, the potential, and the associative levels of total deity function, but not beyond. Now, we continue to trace out the fortunes of the yolk of the egg. This qualified absolute is pervaded by volition, personality, purposiveness, by all which is expressed in the three personalizations of deity. But the Universal Father still isn't the Universal Father, is he? While he now has separated himself from that which is non-deity, he still pervades the wholeness of deity. As Acrimedes said, I need somewhere to stand in order to move the world. And the Universal Father needs to stand in relationship to something in order to engage in creative action. And so he begins to separate himself from the whole of the qualified absolute, from the whole of the yolk of the egg. And he does so first by divesting himself of absolute personality.
Which is this now? Universal Father?
This is, yes, the being who becomes the Universal Father.
I think.
They call him the Universal Father. It's a misnomer, but that's what we're talking about. He steps away from the absolute personality, and in so doing makes himself Father of that absolute person. And this is the origin of the eternal Son. And in becoming Father of the absolute person, he creates the capacity, he establishes the capacity to become Father of all persons. At the same time, he builds the absolute machine to do for him just what a machine does for a human being, to engage in repetitive acts, to function as the material governor of the material cosmos as yet unborn. And then, standing on paradise with the sun, using paradise as a power platform, he and the eternal Son jointly project an expression of creation which is unlimited as to quality, but strictly limited as to actual quantity. They project and create a perfect central universe, which is limited in space and mass, but unlimited in quality of divinity. And in so doing, they trinitize an equal being, the infinite Spirit, who is the eternal expression of their united wills. And in so doing, they also bring into being the Trinity union of the three personalizations of deity. And now, the Father has completely escaped from diffusion, not only throughout the egg, but also throughout the yolk. Henceforth, it is only in conjunction with his two deity equals and as the Trinity that he will pervade all deity reality. And now the Father has liberated himself from the limitations of absoluteness. He's achieved the ability to move. You'll recall that we took inventory of the zero age, and we said, what do we have? In terms of actual existence, we have a power base, paradise, and two existential deities. And what takes place? A trinitizing act, producing a deity equal and giving expression to a nuclear universe. Why nuclear? Because it serves as the nucleus of the grand universe to be. It is the center through which hereditary characteristics are to be transmitted out into the cytoplasmic 7 superuniverses. In the zero age, we have two existential deities, Father and Son, and a power base. The Father and Son trinitize a deity equal and give expression to a perfect universe. And a Trinity, the first Trinity, the Paradise Trinity, forms, concurrent with the formation of the first nuclear universe. Nuclear because it is designed to transmit characteristics, inheritance factors, and growth out into the super universes to be. And these 7 super universes are as cytoplasmic universes in relation to the Havona universe, which is the nuclear universe. There are two master patterns. The master pattern of non-deity or material reality is the Isle of Paradise. And the master pattern of all personalities is the personality of the Eternal Son. In a way, Paradise and the Son are related. They are opposites. They are antipodal complements. They're antithetical complements. Positive and negative complements. One is about as much the opposite of the other as they could be. But here's something very interesting. You remember the duration of the cycle of space respiration? 2 billion years. It's a function of another paradise. There is a creative cycle which pertains to the population of the worlds of the Eternal Son. You know, the middle group of paradise satellites, that creative cycle is also 2 billion years.
What do you mean creative cycle?
I'm not sure what I mean, but I'll read you what the book says, and we can both guess at what it means. How about that? On page 149, in the very short section dealing with the sacred worlds of the Eternal Son, the Paradise philosophers maintain that each paradise cycle, about 2 billion years of Urantia time, witnesses the creation of additional reserves of these orders on the secret worlds of the Eternal Son. I don't know that there's any relationship between the 2 billion year cycle of space respiration and the 2 billion year creative cycle on the worlds of the Eternal Son. But I would be surprised if there weren't some connection. Paradise and the second source and center are eternaler. And the first source and center is eternalist. In other words, had this transaction taken place in time, this is the sequence. There are source relationships in eternity which you can only translate into Bantu by using time sequence relationships. Are you with me? Bantu. You weren't here this morning. And we're discussing the problem of the revelators by drawing an analogy. How would you describe American civilization in the Bantu language?
Yeah.
And you're limited to the language. And we pointed out too, Ruth, that while English can be translated into Bantu, Uversa cannot be translated into English whatsoever. And if you're interested enough, we may spend all tomorrow on the forward too. Because if we can really chew this one up fine, we're not going to hit much else that's tough in the whole book. You know? The forward discusses just 5 topics. It discusses, number 1, deity, in 3 sections, 1 to 3. Second, it discusses reality. What is real? Again, in 3 sections, 4 sections, 4, 5, 6, no, 3 sections, 4, 5, and 6. It discusses, third, experiential deity. Again in 3 sections. 4 sections, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Gosh, I can't count with these Roman numerals. Fourth, it discusses the 3 absolutes in section 11. And fifth, the trinities in section 12. And of course, you have the acknowledgement. When you come right down to it, that isn't a whole lot of material. The catch is it's rather complex. Deity, reality, experiential deity, which is really a subdivision of the discussion of deity. The 3 absolutes, which is an extension of the discussion of reality. And the trinities, which is a summation of the discussion of deity. Really, all they're talking about here is deity and reality in one form or another. Just 2 themes. One of the very great statements made in the Urantia papers is found in paper 12 in the Universe of Universes. Quote, God is spirit, but paradise is not. Here we touch upon one of the essential differences between the metaphysics or cosmology of the Urantia papers and many other religions. I believe in 3 forms of reality: material, mindal, and spiritual. I believe there are 3 sets of laws. I'm ignoring personality for the moment. And I believe that if you want to produce spiritual results, you apply 1 set. You want to produce a material effect, I think praying is strictly for the birds. Set up a material cause. And of course, you have the intervening zone of intellectual reality, which touches on both matter and spirit. You find in Hinduism, they tend to believe in 1 form of energy, in just 1 reality. You have Brahman and you have Maya. In other words, you either are dealing with the absolute or you are dealing with an illusion. And this is true in most religions which touch upon pantheism. The Urantia book presents not only 3 forms of energy operating under 3 distinctly separate types of law. The Urantia book presents the concept of reality, which is both deified and undeified. Not anti-deity, but non-deity. As we look at these papers, we're going to observe that there are 2 absolute realities which are non-deity. Paradise is not deity. Neither is the unqualified absolute. Neither are non-responsive to deity, but neither is deity. paradise is a lot easier to comprehend than the unqualified absolute. I think the simplest definition of paradise is a machine which God built for the same reason that men build machines. In other words, a part of the control of this universe is mechanistic. And why should God be personally concerned with something which a machine can handle? We have the same reaction. We should understand that. Where you have a repetitive act of a mechanical nature, what do you want to do? We want to build a machine. It's characteristic of personality. And one of the reasons is because God himself set this pattern when he designed the absolute machine. And the material heart of the material cosmos is a material reality, not a spiritual reality. In a human being, I think you have the most comprehensible presentation of the interaction of three kinds of reality: matter, mind, and spirit. Not human spirit, but endowed spirit. Here we have an interassociation of the three functioning realities in the finite universes, plus a fourth, personality, which is one of the difficult concepts to get in the Urantia papers. The Urantia papers put some new twists on several words. Personality is one, space is another. We'll spend some time talking about space, because these papers present space as a positive reality, not just a negative reality. And these papers present personality as something quite different from your character, your temperament. We even use personality as a crude synonym for sex appeal, or social charm. But personality is presented in these papers as the fourth reality. Something which is not matter, not mind, and not spirit. And which differs in a way from matter, mind, and spirit, because matter, mind, and spirit, while they are qualitatively different, they exist in terms of quantity. They respond to gravity. And you can measure the degree of response so that you can speak not only of material mass, but intellectual mass and spiritual mass. Personality has quality, but no quantity. There is no mass to personality. And while we're at it, let's talk a little about that. I think the most helpful way of looking at personality is to think of an abstract color. Think of yellow. You all can conceptualize yellow, can't you? But did you ever see yellow except in relation to some object? No. Now you've got a feeling for what personality is. You can conceptualize, you can conceive a personality in the abstract, but you will never see a personality except it is associated with one or more of the acting energies in time and space. These papers can talk about personality in the abstract, but personality never functions unless it is associated with a living energy system.